Hello there once again. It's your favorite chaplain. Welcome back to Atypical Church. Last week I started a new message series called Getting God's Attention, where we explore taking baby steps of faith as well as taking large leaps of faith. Last week I kicked it off by just talking about some of the fundamentals of the Christian faith. In my opinion, we get God's attention first of all by simply recognizing His love, acknowledging our sin, and responding to His call. And once you've made those first baby steps, you're well on your way to learning and starting to take large leaps of faith. If you feel like you're stuck in place, it's time to put yourself in drive. So today I'm going to do a textual sermon, which means I'm going to follow a specific section of Scripture and just speak the message chronologically based on how the event unfolds. And for this message, I'm going to use the story of Peter taken from Matthew chapter 14 in the New Living Translation. So we know that Jesus went to pray by himself and he sent the disciples off on their own in the boat. And then there's a large storm that comes while the disciples are in the boat. We pick it up with, meanwhile the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. Now, when I hear that, I can't help but think of Joshua when he's taking over for Moses after Moses passed away. And the words God spoke to him in Joshua 1:9 are so powerful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So sometimes we may get into trouble in our lives, or at least see trouble coming, and we may feel like we're abandoned or we're all alone or that nobody's listening. And here again, like I said last week, we might feel like we're crying out to God and hearing nothing in return. But let me assure you that God is watching you and He does care. And this is just another example of that. Although the disciples were out there in the boat in a storm and felt like they were abandoned, Jesus was watching from afar. So let's continue with Matthew 14:26-27. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. In their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost." But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage, I am here." It's normal to fear something that you don't understand. And I get it. The Christian walk is difficult and sometimes it's hard to understand. So it's okay to be a little bit terrified at times. However, what we need to do is recognize that it's Jesus that's standing there with us and we're not all alone. And if you listen closely enough, I do believe you'll hear the voice of Jesus calling from the storm. So continuing on, verse 28, then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you, walking on the water." So it's up to us to respond to Jesus. I love here that all the other disciples are just sitting there terrified, and Peter was likely afraid as well. And Peter called out, "Lord, if it's you, call to me. I want to follow you." And we have a choice to make in our moment of fear. We can cower in fear or we can call out to God. And of course, immediately Jesus answers in verse 29, "Yes, come," Jesus said. So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. When we call out to him, he is eager to answer. And I love this baby step of faith. Peter steps out of the boat, totally unsure of how this is going to go, but knowing and confident in the fact that Jesus is there and Jesus will take care of him. We see this same type of response from Jesus many times when he interacts with people. Notice that Jesus doesn't walk up to the boat and actually get in the boat. Instead, he stands on the outside and says, "Come." He could have easily just walked in there and gotten in the boat and fixed everything. But I think the God we serve is more interactional than that. He wants to have a conversation. He wants to see that we're going to respond, that we're going to call out to him, that we're going to come to him and kind of meet him halfway, if you want to look at it that way. If we're not willing to step out of our comfort zone, then we really can't expect God to just do everything for us. Now, of course, I'm not saying that Jesus is telling you to walk on water. but I do believe he's asking you to meet him where he is. Sometimes that does require a lot of faith. I want to go back to the story of Joshua for a second, because in Joshua chapter 3, when he is told to lead the people across the Jordan River, the river doesn't stop until they actually get into it. Listen to this. Joshua 3:15-16. Now the Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It didn't stop until they stepped into it. There might be a situation that you're in or that you're facing that you're really afraid of, and you're just asking God why he doesn't stop it. Well, he might be asking you why you don't step into it, trusting me that I will fix it when you get there. Sometimes we have to take that first baby step or large leap of faith, and I think that's what Jesus was asking Peter to do in this situation. Of course, it doesn't take long for him to lose faith in verse 30. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. Isn't it like us all to get our eyes off of God and onto our problem, onto our situation that's totally wrecking our lives? And that's the only reason Peter sank. The fact that he was walking out to Jesus on water should definitely be something that we're excited about. Unfortunately, a lot of people just talk about Peter failing. However, he did take that baby step of faith. He stepped out of the boat, or maybe you could call that a large leap because he's stepping on the water. So Peter steps out, and I can't help but wonder what the other disciples were thinking. Were they grumbling, complaining, maybe saying, "Who does Peter think he is?" But Peter didn't care about any of that. Peter stepped out of the boat. And no matter what situation you're in, what issue you're facing, you can step out of that boat and step into the arms of Jesus and let him hold you. I know that doesn't magically make the problem go away, but if we keep our eyes on him, he will guide us through it. We read in verse 31 and 32, Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why did you doubt me?" When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. What a beautiful picture that must have been. And when John records this story, he actually says that they miraculously appeared to the destination they were going to. So that's pretty cool too. Jesus will grab you and hold you and carry you. He doesn't necessarily make everything go away, but he will be there with you. I love something that King David said in Psalm 40. Verse 1-2, "I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand." So I've been there myself. I've gotten the call from the doctor where they don't really give you much information. They say they just want to consult you, and you don't really know what that means. In that moment, you can immediately fear and worry and doubt, or you can reach out to Jesus and ask him to help you. Now, that doesn't always make the situation miraculously disappear, but I personally have confidence in my faith that Jesus will be with me every step of the way. And if I'm walking into stormy, treacherous waters and it's going to be scary, that's okay, because I know Jesus is right there to grab my hand and to walk with me. And no matter what happens at the end of the day, I'm in his hands. What a beautiful place to be, right? So I'm going to give you an assignment. I want you to start thinking of what God may be calling you to do or to be or to say or to write or where to go. And start thinking about a vision, a calling that God might have for your life. Because I do believe, even during the COVID pandemic, God has a plan for your life. And it's up to us to answer that calling, to respond, to take that step of faith, and to trust him the whole way. So we'll talk about that a lot more in the next few weeks. I hope you'll continue to join me. God bless you guys. Thank you so much for watching these videos. I really appreciate it. I pray that God does something special in your life because of them. And don't forget that these are based on my book, Becoming Ever Mindful. And you can find that book in all of these locations. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. God bless you guys.